How does a land built entirely by fire spend half the year buried in ice? And how did the people who chose to live between the two survive 1,000 winters on the youngest ground on Earth? This is Iceland, and it is still being made. Look at it from above. A dark, torn shape in a cold gray sea, and closer to the Arctic Circle than to anywhere you'd call warm. A smear of black rock and white ice, with almost nothing green between them. It is younger than human civilization. Some of the stone you'll walk on is younger than you are. Fewer than 400,000 people live on this whole island, a landmass the size of a small country, holding a population smaller than a mid-sized city, in the emptiest corner of Europe. Yet almost every home here is heated by fire pulled straight up out of the ground. Almost every light burns without burning anything at all. The parliament that still governs from the capital was founded in the year 930, 300 years before England could point to a single unbroken line of kings. And the language these people speak has barely changed in 8 centuries, so a child here can read a story written in the year 1200 as easily as a road sign. There are no forests worth the name, and there is not one mosquito on the entire island, but we'll come back to that. In 2010, a single volcano no one outside this country could pronounce threw so much ash into the sky that it grounded roughly 100,000 flights and stopped an entire continent from flying, and for days. That is what this island does. It interrupts the modern world to remind it who was here first. And somewhere off the southern coast, there is a town that was buried alive in a single night, swallowed whole by a mountain that had not existed the week before. People who lived there came back. They dug it out of the ground with their hands. We will end this journey there, in the ash. But that's the end. Stay with us, because first, we go to the place where the ground is tearing open right now. Come south to the Reykjanes Peninsula, a black tongue of old lava reaching out into the Atlantic, and the first thing most travelers see and the last thing they understand. There's nothing soft here. The earth is cracked and raw, the color of cold ash and dried blood, and steam leaks up through the seams in the rock, as if something enormous and patient is breathing just below the surface. And for 800 years this land held still. The fishermen built their lives on it. The road ran across it to the airport. Everyone assumed it was finished. Then, a few years ago, it woke up. The ground began to swell. Small earthquakes rolled through, thousands of them, and day and night, a whole peninsula trembling like something about to sneeze. And then it split. At a place called Þingvellir, a fresh crack opened in the earth, and fire began to pour out of it. And not the explosion you picture, but something slower and stranger, a thick orange rope of molten rock folding over itself, glowing and cooling to black at the edges, then breaking open again in a bright seam. People walked out to see it. Families with children on their shoulders, standing on a ridge in the dark to watch new land being made a few hundred meters away, the heat pushing against their faces. You can do that here. You can stand on a hillside and watch a continent add to itself in real time, and watch the newest rock on the planet harden at your feet while it is still red inside. But the fire does not ask where the towns are. A little way along the coast, the fishing community of Grindavik has watched cracks tear straight up through its roads and its gardens, has felt the ground drop beneath its own streets, and its people have had to walk away from their homes, not once, but again and again, and not knowing each time whether there would be a home to come back to. This is the real price of living on an island that isn't finished. The land gives you ground, and then it opens that ground, and it never once asks your permission. This is Iceland at its most honest. This is the earth, still open, still deciding. Now hold that picture in your mind, the slow orange rope and families watching, the beauty of it. Because 240 years ago, this same island did the same thing, and it very nearly killed everyone on it. Go inland now, away from the coast, up into the highlands where the paved roads give up and the maps go pale and blank. Out here in a place so remote most Icelanders will never see it, lies a long row of craters called Lakagigar. and Laki, around 130 separate mouths torn in a nearly straight line across the earth, like a wound that was stitched by something that didn't care. Stand among them today, and it is quiet. Moss has grown soft and gray over the old lava, so thick and deep you could sink your arm into it, and the only sound is the wind moving across the landscape that has forgotten what it did. In 1783 it had not forgotten. For 8 months this fissure bled. It poured out one of the largest floods of lava in recorded human history, and worse than the lava was what came with it. A haze the Icelanders named the Moðaharðindin, the mist hardships, a low chemical fog of sulfur and fluorine that settled over the grass and stayed. The animals ate the grass. The fluorine rotted the teeth in their mouths and swelled their joints until they could not stand. And the livestock died first. Most of the sheep, most of the cattle, most of the horses on the entire island gone. And the crops failed under the sunless sky. Then the people began to starve. By the time the craters finally went quiet, and roughly 1 in every 5 human beings on this island was dead. And the mist did not stay home. It drifted east across the ocean and dimmed the sun over Europe, poisoned harvests in countries that had never heard the word Laki and never would, thinned the crowds in distant cities in a hungry year. Historians still argue about how far the ripples of that hunger spread and how much they stirred the anger already building on the mainland. And walk the craters now, with the moss soft underfoot and the light going gold, and none of that seems possible. But here is the thing the survivors understood in their bones, the thing we forget when we look at the pretty orange rope of lava. And the fire that heats their homes and lights their long dark nights is the exact same fire that once tried to wipe them from the earth. There is no good fire and bad fire here. There is only fire, and how close it is standing. This is Laki. This is what the ground remembers under all that moss. Leave the killing fields behind. Keep going inland, further than seems reasonable, past the last farm and the last fence, until the world stops looking like Earth at all. This is Askja, a vast bowl of grayle and black rock sunk into the center of the island, ringed by nothing, reachable only for a few months a year, a place so barren, so scrubbed of every soft thing, that when NASA needed to prepare the men who would walk on the moon, they sent them here. In the 60s, the Apollo astronauts came to this valley to train, to learn how to move and think and read a landscape that had no water, no green, and trees, no scale, nothing for the human eye to hold on to, and walk it yourself, and you feel exactly what they were sent to feel. The strange vertigo of a place with no reference points, and where a boulder could be a pebble at your feet or a house a mile away, and you cannot tell which. Ground is loose pumice and old ash, and it shifts and crunches with a sound like walking on burnt bone. And at one edge of the bowl sits a crater the Icelanders named, with their usual bluntness, Viti, which means simply hell. It is a deep round pit, and cradled at the bottom of it is a lake of milky, opaque, faintly sulphurous water, warm enough to swim in, an unreal pale blue against all that black. And you can climb down the loose slope and lower yourself into hell here, if you want to, and float in water the color of the sky in a crater named for the underworld. The men who trained on this ground went on to press their boots into the dust of another world entirely. They came here first, because in all the places we could reach, this cold, empty valley was the closest thing to the moon that Earth had to offer. This is Askja. This is our own planet doing an impression of somewhere else. And now, the reversal this whole island is built on. Because all of that fire, all the heat and the killing and the slow orange glow, spends half the year hidden completely beneath its opposite, Meet Vatnajökull, the largest glacier in Europe by the sheer volume of its ice, a frozen cap so wide it makes its own weather, so heavy it presses the land down into the planet beneath it. From the air it is almost too bright to look at, a white ocean gone perfectly still, cracked here and there with lines of blue, spilling down between the mountains in slow frozen rivers. But the wonder is inside it, Each winter, as meltwater drains away, caves open in the base of the ice, and when you crawl into one, the whole world changes color. The ice here is old and deeply compressed, and the air squeezed out of it over centuries until what remains is dense and clear and glows a blue so pure and so electric it doesn't look natural, and curved and rippled and lit from somewhere you can never quite locate. It is silent in there but for the far-off drip of the ice slowly becoming water again. It feels eternal, unchangeable, older than everything. It is none of those things, because directly underneath this ice, volcanoes are still awake. And when one of them erupts down there in the dark, it does not throw fire into the sky, melts the glacier from below, quietly, invisibly, filling a hidden lake of meltwater under all that white until the pressure grows too great and the whole thing lets go at once, and a flood bursts out from beneath the ice in a single afternoon, a wall of water and grinding icebergs that has torn away roads and swept off bridges as if they were made of paper. The Icelanders have a word for it, a glacier flood born of fire, fire under ice feeding a flood. This is Vatnajökull. This is the exact place where the two forces stop pretending to be opposites and finally admit they were always the same thing. And from the largest glacier on the island, we go to a smaller one, a single mountain that a stranger once decided was a door. And a long peninsula reaching west stands Snæfellsjökull, a near-perfect cone of a volcano wearing a cap of white, is so isolated and so striking that on a clear day you can see it from the capital, floating on the far side of the bay like something imagined. And for most of history it was simply that, a beautiful and dangerous mountain at the end of the land. Then, in the 1800s, a French writer named Jules Verne looked at it on a map and decided it was something more. In his story, this is the mountain you climb down into, the exact crater whose throat drops all the way to the center of the earth. And for a century and a half, readers have arrived at its foot half believing it, looking up at that white cone and wondering how far down it really goes. And standing there yourself in the low gold evening light with the glacier catching fire above you, you begin to understand the beauty of Verne's mistake. Because a volcano like this one truly does hold a passage downward, not to some hollow world of dinosaurs and underground seas, but to the real furnace, the molten heart that made every single thing you have seen on this journey. And Verne wasn't wrong that the door was here. He was only wrong about what waits on the other side of it. The truth is stranger than his fiction, and it's real. This is Snæfellsjökull. This is a story so good the land itself agreed to play along. You've been climbing mountains and crawling into glaciers, chasing the big wide shots. Now leave all of that behind. Come down to sea level and walk out onto a beach and watch your feet. The sand here is black. Not gray, not merely dark, black and glittering and cold underfoot, ground down bones of ancient lava that the ocean has been polishing for 10,000 years. This is Reynisfjara, and it may be the most beautiful place on this whole island to die. Turn your back on the water and look at the cliff behind you, and you'll see it isn't made of ordinary rock. It's made of columns, hundreds of them, six-sided, packed and stacked from the sand to the cliff top like the pipes of some vast black organ. It's so regular and so deliberate that the eye refuses to believe the earth did this by itself. And look out to sea, and three jagged spires of dark rock stand straight up out of the breaking surf, alone. And the old people tell you what they are. They are trolls, three of them, caught out at night trying to drag a ship to shore, who lingered a moment too long. And when the first light of dawn touched them, they turned to stone where they stood, and they are standing there still. The colder truth is that basalt cracks into those clean hexagonal columns on its own as a thick sheet of lava cools slowly and evenly, and the sea stacks are just the last teeth of a headland the ocean has spent millennia eating away. But stand on the black sand now and stop talking. Listen, the wind drops for a moment. There's the long hiss of the sand as the water pulls back through it. A single seabird somewhere high in the columns calls once. Further down the beach, a loose rope or a chain knocks against something, slow again. again, and nothing else. And it's in exactly that peaceful, held-breath silence that this beach does the thing it is known for. A wave comes in, one wave far larger and far faster than the dozens before it, silent until the instant it's upon you, sweeping 30 or 40 feet up the black sand, reaching past where anyone thought the water could go. They call them sneaker waves, and they have pulled people off this beach who were only there to take a photograph, and the cold sea has not given all of them back. It looks like the gentlest, most cinematic place on earth. It is one of the most lethal. This is Reynisfjara. This is the ocean, keeping a secret with a straight face. Move on before the water changes its mind about you. I go northeast now, inland again, to a wide, bright field where the ground cannot seem to stop clearing its throat. And this is Þingvellir, and one hot spring here gave every geyser on the entire planet its name. The original spring, the great geyser itself, has mostly gone quiet with old age now, dozing between rare eruptions. But right beside it, its restless neighbor Strákur performs for anyone who waits. Stand at the rope and watch the pool. The surface is calm, faintly steaming, a clear window down into blue. Then the water begins to move, it gathers and it domes upward, swelling into a smooth blue glass blister the size of a car, rising, holding for one impossible second, and it bursts, throwing a column of scalding water and white steam 20 or 30 meters straight up into the cold air before it collapses back down and vanishes into the ground to gather itself again. It does this every few minutes, all day, all year. It has been doing it far longer than anyone has been standing here to count. The old farmers who lived beside it thought the ground was angry, or breathing, or alive, a giant asleep just beneath the crust, turning over. And they weren't as wrong as you'd think. Rain and snowmelt sink down through cracks in the rock, deeper and deeper, until they meet the heat of a magma chamber sitting close beneath the surface, and the water flashes to steam and comes roaring back up to the light. This is Strákur. This is the whole island breathing out. Now we slow the journey right down. The fire lists back for a while, and something quieter and much sadder takes its place at the water's edge. At the southern foot of Vatnajökull sits a wide lagoon called Jökulsárlón, and it is filled with drifting icebergs, great pale shapes of white and deep blue, some of them the size of houses, turning slowly and silently in the still water as they make their way toward the open sea. They are beautiful in a way that stops conversation. They are also a countdown, because each of these bergs has broken off the front of a glacier that is pulling back, retreating up the valley year after year, and this lagoon itself is proof of it. It did not exist a century ago. It opened up as the ice withdrew, a growing pool of meltwater where solid glacier used to be, and it gets a little wider every summer. And the bergs drift across it, out through a short channel and into the ocean. And some of them are pushed straight back by the waves onto the black beach beside the river mouth, where they lie scattered across the dark volcanic sand like broken diamonds glittering, which is exactly why people have started calling it Diamond Beach. Crouch down and put your hand flat on one. This ice fell as snow 1,000 years ago, before there were engines, before there was a light bulb anywhere on Earth, and it was pressed and compacted and turned this deep glass blue over 10 centuries of patient winters. And now it is melting under your palm in a single afternoon, running clear and cold back into the sea it came from. There is no drama to it at all, and that's what makes it hard to watch. A photographer down the beach folds up a tripod and heads for the car. A single gull picks its way along the tide line. The ice just quietly goes. This is Jökulsárlón. This is time itself, made visible for once, and it is not waiting for you to be ready. And from ice that is quietly disappearing, we go to land that is only just arriving. In 1963, the crew of a fishing boat off the southern coast saw a column of dark smoke rising from open water, and from a place where the charts said there was only sea. It was not a ship on fire. It was an island being born. Deep below the surface, a volcano had reached the top of the ocean, and for the better part of 4 years the sea boiled, and the fire built and cooled and built again, until a brand new black island stood steaming above the waves where nothing had been before. And the Icelanders named it Surtsey, after Surtur, the fire giant from the Old Norse myths, and the one prophesied to come at the end of the world with a flaming sword and burn everything down. And then the people of this island did something quietly extraordinary. They closed it. From almost the very beginning, they decided that no one would live on Surtsey, no one would farm it, no one would so much as picnic on it. At this day, only a tiny handful of scientists are ever permitted to set foot there, and even they step carefully, because the whole point is to leave it alone. This new, raw, untouched island is one of the only places on the planet where we get to watch, from the outside, exactly how life arrives on ground that has never held any. At first a single seed carried on the wind, then years later the first stubborn plant, then an insect, then a seabird stopping to rest, and everything a seabird carries in and leaves behind. A whole living world slowly assembling itself out of bare black rock, unhelped, unhurried, and, most remarkably, unwatched by us, by our own choice. It is the youngest land on Earth, and we agreed as a species to keep our hands off it. This is Surtsey. This is a beginning we decided we didn't have the right to touch. And speaking of things born entirely by accident, come back toward the fire now, and to the most famous blue in the whole country, and the one with the strangest secret. I've almost certainly seen the photograph. Milky, glowing, impossible turquoise water, steaming in the cold against a field of jagged black lava, people up to their shoulders in it with their faces smeared ghost white in mineral mud. This is the Blue Lagoon, one of the most visited places in all of Iceland. A wonder people fly across the entire world to sit in for an afternoon. And here is what the postcard will never tell you. It is an accident. It is industrial runoff. And the water comes from the geothermal power plant next door at Svartsengi, and which pulls superheated water up from deep underground to spin its turbines and make electricity. And then it discharges that water, still hot, still heavy with dissolved silica and minerals, out into the black lava field, pooled there in the rock. And as the silica caught the light, it turned that unreal, luminous, milky blue. And local people began to notice that their skin felt strange and soft and better after they'd waded in the warm wastewater of a power station. And word spread. And now one of the most photographed natural wonders in the country is quite literally the beautiful exhaust of a machine. And there is something perfectly Icelandic in that. This is the Blue Lagoon. This is a nation that will take even the leftovers of its own furnace and turn them into something people cross oceans to touch. The steam from that plant does far more than fill a single lagoon. Follow the pipes running out of it, and they lead you all the way to a city. This is Reykjavik, the northernmost capital of any sovereign nation on Earth, and one of the quietly strangest cities you will ever stand in. And when the first Norse settlers sailed into this bay more than 1,100 years ago, they saw columns of what looked like smoke rising up out of the ground, and they named the place Reykjavik, Smoky Bay, and settled there. It wasn't smoke, it was steam, the earth venting its own heat into the cold air, and that misunderstanding turned out to be the single luckiest thing that ever happened to this country. Because today that heat runs the entire place. Reykjavik warms very nearly every home and heats very nearly every tap, with water piped directly up from the volcanic ground beneath it. In the coldest, darkest night of the winter, the pavements of some streets here are gently warm underfoot, and the snow melts the instant it lands on them, because there is naturally hot water running through pipes just below the stone. This is a modern city in the middle of the North Atlantic, in near permanent winter darkness, that burns almost nothing at all to stay alive. It simply borrows the fire that was already there, and the people walking these bright streets past the concert hall and the coffee shops carry something just as old under the surface. They can still read the sagas, the epic, violent, gossipy stories their ancestors wrote down 800 years ago in the original Old Norse, because their language has changed so little that those medieval words are as plain to a child here as this morning's news. Ask one of them gently about the hidden folk, the ones some say still live inside particular rocks and hills, and watch how carefully, how unmockingly they choose their answer. This is Reykjavik. This is the 21st century, running quietly on an ancient furnace, reading a 1,000-year-old book. There's one more thing to understand about these people, and it begins at a long crack in the ground about an hour east of the city. This is Þingvellir, and it may be the most important open field in the entire country. Two enormous things meet in this one place. First, you can see with your own eyes, a deep, long rift cutting straight through the landscape, and black cliffs of rock standing apart from each other with a valley of moss and clear water between them, a valley that grows measurably wider by around 2 centimeters every single year. Because this is the exact seam where two of the planet's great tectonic plates, the North American and the Eurasian, are slowly pulling apart and walk down into the fissure, and you are standing physically between two continents, in the widening gap and a stretch of ground that belongs fully to neither of them. A second great thing that met here you cannot see at all, but it happened right on this spot, and it changed the island forever. In the year 930, the scattered and quarrelsome chieftains of this young settlement rode from every corner of the land to this rift in the earth, and they did something that almost no one else in the world was doing at that time. They agreed to sit down together in the open air and make their laws out loud as one people. They called their assembly the Alþingi, and it became one of the oldest continuous parliaments in human history, meeting on this exact ground for centuries. And think for a moment about where they chose to do it. Not inside a great hall, not behind the walls of a fortress, but out here, on the raw, splitting seam of a planet coming apart at the joints, in the one place on the whole island that is literally and physically breaking in two. A brand new people learning how to hold themselves together and choosing to do it standing directly in the crack. This is Þingvellir. This is the birthplace of a nation, balanced on a fault line, which brings us, at the very last, all the way back to the town we left behind in the dark, at the very beginning. Off the south coast lies a small scattered cluster of islands called the Westman Islands, and on the largest of them, Himes, a working fishing town, went to sleep on an ordinary, unremarkable night in January of 1973. Then, at around 1 o'clock in the morning, the ground on the eastern edge of town simply split open. A fissure more than a kilometer long tore across the island and began hurling fountains of fire into the black sky, and right at the back doors of 5,000 sleeping people. And what happened over the hours and months that followed is the part of this whole journey that I keep coming back to. There was a stroke of impossible luck first. A storm the day before had driven the entire fishing fleet back into the harbor, and nearly every boat the town owned was tied up at the docks. And so, in the dark, in the falling ash, under a sky full of fire, a whole population of the town walked down to the water and sailed away on their own fishing boats. Thousands of people, calmly in a single night, across the black winter sea, and against every expectation, almost no one died. And here is the part that tells you who these people are. They did not simply run and let the island go. A new volcano, which they named Eldfell, the fire mountain, kept erupting for months, and eventually a slow, grinding river of lava began crawling directly toward the mouth of the harbor, and that harbor was the entire reason the town existed at all. So the men and women who dared to stay did something that had really never been seriously tried before. They laid pipes down to the ocean and began pumping cold seawater directly onto the advancing wall of lava, hour after hour, day after day, and week after week, cooling its leading edge, hardening it, forcing it to build a dam out of its own stone that turned the rest of the flow aside. And astonishingly, it worked. The lava ground to a halt just short of the harbor mouth. The harbor survived, and when the eruption finally ended, people came home to a town half swallowed in black ash, streets gone, roofs gone, homes buried to the eaves, and instead of walking away from a dead place, they picked up shovels and dug it back out of the ground, one house and one street at a time. And walk Jaime today and you'll still find doorframes and rooftops rising out of the hardened black earth, Whole homes preserved at the exact moment the fire reached them, and a brand new red mountain standing over the town that simply wasn't there before that January night. This is Jaime. This is what it looks like to lose everything you own to the fire in the space of one night, and then refuse, absolutely refuse, and to let it keep the ground. So what is this island in the end? We were promised ice and fire at the very start, and we have found both over and over, the glacier and the lava, the killing flood and the killing drought, the freezing and the burning, all folded onto the same small piece of rock in the middle of a cold sea. But somewhere along the way, if you were watching closely, the two of them stopped looking like enemies. And the fire that gently heats the capital is the very same fire that emptied this island of 1 in 5 of its people in 1783. The ice that draws travelers from every continent is the same ice that hides the volcanoes still burning underneath it. This was never a war between ice and fire. It's a truce, an old, uneasy, working truce, and the people who live here renew it every single morning simply by choosing one more time to stay. They never beat this land. Nobody beats this land. What they did was far harder and far braver. They learned how to live inside its argument and to call that home. And maybe that's the one thing worth carrying back out of here with you. We spend so much of our short lives straining towards solid ground, and finished house, the settled career, the safe and final place where nothing more can ever crack open beneath us. This island has never once offered anyone that, and it never will. It is unfinished by its very nature. The plates are still pulling apart under Þingvellir tonight. Craters are still slowly cooling out at Laki. The newest rock on the peninsula is still glowing red on the inside as you watch this. And the people who chose this place chose the crack on purpose. They built a whole nation directly inside it, and they read their 1,000-year-old stories by the light of a fire that could still on any given night decide to take it all back. There is a strange and stubborn kind of comfort in that, if you'll let it in, that a place does not have to be safe or settled or finished, and to be worth loving with your whole heart. That the ground under every single one of us is far younger and far stranger and far more alive than we like to pretend, and that the most alive places of all, the ones that get into your chest and stay there, are almost always the ones still being made. There's one small thing I mentioned at the start and never explained, and I'm not going to explain it now, because no one really can. In all of this, the fire and the flood, the black sand and the blue ice, the 1,000 long dark winters, and there is not a single mosquito on this entire island. A land all around it has them. This one place does not. Nobody has ever fully worked out why. They simply don't stay. Thank you for making this whole journey with us, all the way out to the edge of the map and back again. If one place along the way reached in and stopped you, the town they dug out of the ash, the milk blue lake in the crater called Hell, the 1,000-year-old ice melting in someone's open hand, then tell us in the comments which one it was and why it was that one. And if some part of you wants to go and stand somewhere else the world simply forgot to finish, then subscribe and come with us. I'll see you in the next journey toward the next strange land still waiting to be made.